There you go.
Welcome
Lift
everyone.
off.
Yes, welcome everyone to the Music Reel episode 5. So I'm going to introduce everybody. So to my left, your right is Nikki, who will shortly be moderating after I introduce Mr. Tyrone Noonan, who's down the bottom. Say hi, Ty.
Hi, Ty.
Pardon.
Hello.
Hi, Ty.
Hi, how you going?
Mr. Mark Colvin,
And
DJ Trademark, and Mr. Michael Jeeves, Mr. Venus Envy himself. Howdy, folks. All right, so as I said, we're inviting a plethora or a pot of individuals to the Music Reel. This is episode 5. It's a broad-based sort of industry situation where we sort of interviewing musicians, producers, publicists, radio pluggers, anyone that's part of the salient music industry, so to speak. So episode 5 is Mr. Tyrone Noonan. So Tyrone, now I'm going to introduce Tyrone, who is he's the co-lead singer of the band George. George, obviously had won their ARIAs and basically over 200,000 plus record CD downloads, etc., etc. He's an esteemed producer. He's a teacher. He's a live performer. He's an arc welder, and he's a psychotherapist. But also, what people don't know about Mr. Tyrone Noonan, he's also an investigative journalist. So we've got lots to talk about with Tyrone. So I'm going to hand you over to Nikki now, who will now moderate the Music Reel episode number 5.
Ty, you sound like you're a little bit talented. Just a little bit talented. Got a few things happening there.
I just get bored. I get bored easily. That's my excuse.
What have you been doing for the last 6 weeks while we've been in lockdown? What has been helping you alleviate the boredom, so to speak?
Well, the first order of business has been catching up on tax.
Yep, we're all doing that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So that's been good. That's been good actually, because it's been something that's been on. Basically, I've just been working through, the things that have been on my to-do list, pretty much.
Yeah, and are you almost at the end of your to-do list, or
No.
no?
No.
We could be locked
Nowhere
in
near it.
another 6 months.
Yep. Give me another 6 months and I'll be finally caught up.
A lot of people are saying that. Are you doing a lot of cooking while you're at home?
Absolutely.
All right. So what?
Yeah, I kind of myself and my I guess my ex-wife at this point. We're good friends now though, so it's all good. No doom and gloom there. She signed us up to, what was it? Not HelloFresh, Marley Spoon.
Yep.
We're on Marley Spoon for a while, and I was, because she was working 9 to 5. I was the cooking guy, and I think it taught me the basics of cooking. I guess having all the ingredients and the directions. I'm kind of like somebody who can't really kind of just make it up on the go.
Okay.
I have to have a set list, and if I follow that to the letter, generally it works out okay.
So because I'm renowned for being like the worst cook on the planet, and poor old Manny's been struggling with me cooking every night. So I wanted to know from you, what is the dish that you've destroyed the most, that has been the most epic fail in this lockdown? Because I've probably got about 10 of them. Wanted to hear yours. The most disgusting.
Gosh, I don't know. Like I kind of, I'm going to sound boring now, but I have these kind of set dishes that I like, and I've just been pretty much sticking to those. I've been having a little bit more pasta than usual. I don't know why, but maybe because previously I'd be making up more meals on the go between gigs or whatever, and so now that I'm home more, I'm finding I'm having pasta again.
Wow.
But that's not necessarily good for long term for my midriff.
Well, when you go shopping, you can find plenty of chickpea and red lentil pasta, but not a lot of normal pasta, so which isn't too bad.
Yeah. It's like pasta, toilet paper. What's the other strange thing I noticed? There's some odd things that have been running out on the shelves.
I know. Yeah. Metho. You can't find methylated spirits anywhere.
Bunnings.
Running, really?
Yeah. Yes.
Mark.
Yes, so you can make poor man's hand sanitizer.
All
Hey,
right,
Ty.
so, yeah.
What sort of music have you been listening to in lockdown? Is any different stuff or just the usual? Have you expanded the?
I've got a wall of vinyl that I hardly ever get a chance to listen to.
Yeah.
And one project that's coming up that's being organised by some other people, but they've asked me to be involved, is this kind of celebration of the sound of trip hop.
Nice.
This project. So I've been, and basically that's pretty much what got me started DJing. When I started hearing, it was really like, almost orchestral music over hip hop beats. It was just like, wow, this is like heaven for me. And so I got right into that kind of thing. I kind of got dragged out of the DJ world back into the band scene with George. Other than that, I was pretty much convinced from my time in Europe that I wasn't going to do bands again.
Yeah. Understandable.
I can explain that story if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
I was in a band. All right, yeah. So I was in a band in Dublin called The Charm. This was in the early '90s, and we were basically like like during the week for we'd do corporate gigs, etc. Doing like a Beatles tribute band called The Beatless, and then we also had an original band that we do 1 gig a month or a couple of gigs a month or something at some of the local venues. Anyway, so we recorded our first EP, and as you could imagine, because we were playing Beatles music most of the time, it was quite a Beatlesque kind of sounding thing, kind of a bit like Oasis, although they were just breaking. We didn't even really know them at the time. But because Oasis was just breaking, all the labels, etc., were looking for the next Oasis. And we had, which is apparently unheard of pretty much, we had labels flying over from London to Dublin to see us play because we refused to go to London to play, which is traditionally how it was only ever done. And it was crazy. And we had 3 different labels who wanted to sign us. And the guy who'd started the band before I joined, he was from Wolverhampton, which is down the road from Liverpool. He seriously looked like Paul McCartney. He had the same kind of high eyebrows, and he sang like John Lennon. It was ridiculous. Great muso too, but he'd obviously had some very bizarre or disturbing experiences early in his days in the music industry.
Yeah.
I mean, how is this for children? This podcast or?
Oh, it's G-rated.
It's G-rated. Well, let me just say he was offered some suspicious kind of circumstances to enact certain deals. There you go.
Okay.
So he either had this kind of fear or failure or fear of success, and every time that there'd be someone flying over to see a gig, he'd get really trashed and then just end up being a dickhead on stage. Sorry, an idiot on stage, and it was just so bizarre. So it was a band that should have been signed, but didn't because of him. And so I came, and I was getting really into what was happening, and found what was happening in the club and DJ scene in Dublin at that time much more exciting anyway. So I came back from overseas, convinced I was done with bands, and was just going to do DJ and club stuff, which is what I was doing.
Look how well that turned out. Wow. Yeah, look.
Someone else had other plans for me.
Someone else had other plans. Because, Ty, that happens in bands so much, doesn't it? There'll be someone that just has this, something will trigger them and they just can't get it together. And they're so incredibly talented. We've all had that. Just look at someone and go, man, you're fantastic. You should be signed. But something just triggers them and sets them off and they just can't get it together.
Yeah. It was also, we had another thing too, like the Nigel's single off our first EP had this awesome riff, right? Yeah. And I swear to you, it's just unfreaking believable. We recorded it and hadn't yet released the EP, and but this didn't bother the record companies. We thought it was going to be a bit of a killer for us, although it wasn't the only single on the EP. Paul Weller came out with this new single called Sunflower, the exact same riff, in the exact notes, in the same key, and we were just like, no freaking way. It was just one of those moments. Like, it was just like, what? Like exactly the same, like literally note for note. Like almost we were like, what the hell's going on here? Did someone like, you know, someone in the studio in Dublin go, oh, Paul, rip this off, you know?
Yeah,
I
but
don't know. It's just,
that
I
whole,
couldn't believe it.
whole
In
hundredth
the music
monkey,
industry.
that whole hundredth monkey syndrome, where somehow it's just out there in the ether. You know, we've all had
Yeah.
that happen. You have this idea, and then someone over in the other side of the world comes out with it.
Yes, I think the last original riff was probably written, you know, in the late 80s.
I had the same thing happen in like 1995 or something. I was sitting in my bedroom playing this cool little acoustic ditty that I came up with. I was like, this is really cool. And then a month or two later, Red Hot Chili Peppers came out with My Friends, and it was the exact same thing. I'm like,
There you go.
There you go.
Just like,
I quickly shelved my version.
Got a question for
Well,
Tyrone.
there are only 12 notes, right?
Yeah.
Explains a
Oh.
lot, Michael.
Unless we're talking Eastern scales, of course.
Fair enough. So, Tyrone Noonan, the most defining moment in the band George, but there's a history that we had with George when you guys were first bursting onto the scene. You approached,
Yes.
you approached me, and Katie approached me, and it was very interesting. And unfortunately, I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I had respect for it. It was
You and most people in the industry.
yeah, I had total respect for it. I didn't understand it, and there it was. I got it wrong, as I did with another couple of bands that became global sensation, and you know, probably some of the biggest bands in Australia. But I didn't get it. But what was the most defining moment in George? Was it the first gold, first platinum, or first aria?
I'll tell you the most defining moment for me personally. It was at a gig, I think it was in Port Macquarie. We were supporting Midnight Oil, right?
Yep.
And there were these two kind of, you know, I'm just going to say it, real redneck looking guys with mullets kind of up the back. And like every time I'd get up to sing, I'd hear them going, "Aah!" And I thought they were just, you know, like, because I don't know if anyone's ever had the awesome pleasure but also challenging scenario of doing a support for Midnight Oil. You know, sometimes, like, I mean, at Alexandra Headland, I can't repeat half the stuff people were saying, but, you know, it was like, F off, we want Peter, and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was used to. And there were these two guys up the back, and every time I get up to sing, "Aah!" And I just kind of basically blocked them out. But then this is the most surreal moment, one of the most surreal moments of my life. Then when we got up to do Bastard Son, these two guys started running towards the stage, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? What I didn't realise, and Katie told me later, I'll explain the rest later, but the next thing, the most surreal moment of my life, these two guys are up on stage like go-go dancers on either side of me while I'm singing the song, and I'm just like, what the hell is happening? And anyway, later I found out that Katie was told me, no, they weren't taking the piece. Every time you were getting up to sing, they were going, oh, mate, watch yourself, got to save yourself for Bastard Son, all this kind of stuff. I was like, no way. That's the moment I realised that whatever we were doing had kind of crossed over, you know,
It's
transcended culture.
That moment of connection is just so important. When you realise, when you're up on stage and you see people that actually know the words to your songs, it's just a magical moment. I can remember that in the early days when we were playing. People, you know, become fans. They love what you do. There's a connection point, and you know that that's a very special moment. So congratulations with that. So I'll let Mark, from a DJ point of view to DJ, ask Tyrone Noonan a DJ question.
well, so a very simple one for you, mate. What do you think's going to be different in the live music scene when we all actually get released back out into the wild?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's a very interesting question. It's a little bit unknown, I think, but I'm hoping that there will be a renewed understanding and appreciation of what live music has to offer. I think the problem with the current, like all the millennials, I guess at least, is that I think they may have missed the boat a little bit due to the influence of technology on their very daily existence. Like, for instance, I was on a panel a couple of years ago with Jock from the Zoo, and it was just before she sold the venue.
Yeah.
And she was pretty much in despair, just kind of talking about how much the live music culture had changed generationally, and that you know the current crop of kids were basically turning up half an hour before the main act is on, so not turning up at the start of the night to see the supports and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know, myself and at least my generation used to do. They turn up 15 minutes before the live act, wait for the song that they know, the single, they film the single, and then would sometimes leave before the gig's even over. It's like they haven't even allowed themselves to disengage from their techno bubble world to actually appreciate and feel what's actually happening in the room at the moment. Yeah. And I think that's a terrible loss if that's really what it's like for that generation. And so I'm hoping that maybe there's a chance to kind of reset that and reignite that understanding and appreciation for live music. I mean, look, I think, Australia suffers a lot. I think it's, Australia's a very difficult place. I mean, there's really no other country in the world where you get a certain percentage of the population where music has literally no meaning in their life. There's like, I think, that's in Britain, Ireland, all the other kind of white Western nations, for want of a better word right now. Australia's completely unique like that. Like I always talk about, say, comparing America and Australia. There are a lot of comparisons you can make between America and Australia, but I always say, like, you find the most ignorant, toothless redneck in America, and no doubt he's sitting on his porch picking banjo. So even at the very, very worst end of American culture, there's still deep respect for music. And
what we're
sadly, we don't really have that here. I think that back in the 70s and 80s, it was different, and there was much more respect and appreciation for live music. And I think that's how bands like In Excess and Midnight, all those bands were able to thrive and then, end up becoming international acts.
Yeah, because we're actually, in essence, we're selling a sensory experience, aren't we? We're selling this live energy exchange. And now that we're all at home, sure, we can listen to it on Spotify, but it's not the same if you're not there and feeling it. And you can't necessarily explain it or articulate it, but there's a difference. And so that's what ultimately all of us are selling, is that energy exchange, that sensory experience. So we are hopeful, Tyrone, that you are right, that when we come out of this, there will be this renewed reimagination of the music market, of music for any generation, especially the younger ones coming up, because this thing here doesn't give you that energy exchange. It doesn't give you that sensory experience.
No, and even still, like the MP3s themselves don't give you that. It's like a flattened out kind of like I heard a really good explanation of an MP3. So an MP3 is like a digital rubbing. So you know how you can go to those famous kind of fascias or whatever and put your wax paper over and do a rubbing. So essentially that's what an MP3 is like. It's like a digital rubbing. It's not the original, and that's why there's a lot of hearing loss problems, with people listening to their music on iPhones, etc. Because one, they're often on buses or trains, so they have to get over that external noise. Plus, subconsciously, they're searching for something in that MP3 that just isn't there, so they turn it up to try and invigorate that experience.
For the sensory experience, aren't they, that they can't quite get. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I have a very important question. Actually, this is the most important question of the lockdown lowdown for you, Ty, is if you could go back in time to December 2019, what would be the message that you would give yourself?
Gosh. Wow. Prepare.
How would you prepare? If you knew in advance, how would you prepare for this?
I would have gone and bought every bottle of Isocol available in Brisbane and then made a small fortune afterwards.
Yeah.
Sold them all on eBay for 10 times the price.
Yeah.
I'd be sitting pretty right. I'd be sitting pretty right now.
Right. Look, thank you so much for your time today. We just wanted to know what you were doing because I know you've got a lot of projects on the go. You're producing, you're writing, you're recording. You've got a release coming up, what, a couple of months down the track?
Yes, I'm just trying to get my video editor to commit to a timeline.
Okay.
You know, it's challenging at the moment because, you know, my video editor has a bunch of businesses and 2 of them have imploded as a result of COVID. So it's, you know, can't put too much pressure. But yeah, just trying to get a timeline because I think, like I mentioned that previous song, Bastard Son, before, that song had a lot of impact and was quite helpful, I think, for a lot of people, particularly young men kind of struggling with, you know, with just, you know, I mean, this is an absolutely beautiful country, but we do have we have a big problem with particularly youth male suicide and depression, etc. I mean, it's across the board too. I think, you know, the stats are, I think, pretty much, sorry to get so serious for a sec, but the stats are that, you know, women, I think, are generally more likely to attempt suicide, but men are generally more successful at it. And that's partly due, that just kind of shows you that men are less likely to have a supportive community around them, you know,
so
due to kind of complications in the masculinity culture in our culture. And I think that song Bastard Son kind of somehow touched on all of that and then touched a nerve. And my next single, which is called Black Dog, which is, it's not as intense as Bastard Son. It's a more upbeat, but it's also, it's an upbeat, positive, but honest look at depression.
Right.
Kind of told from someone who's been through it, come out the other side, you know, giving a hopeful story to someone else who's going through it, kind of thing. And I think that song has probably the most potential for anything I've released since Bastard Son to have hopefully a similar positive effect, particularly right now. Yeah, so that's why I'm like, please, video editor.
Well, look, we would really love
Get it done so I can commit to a timeline and get this song out there. Yeah.
Well, we'd like to actually have you back on again specifically to talk about that and to talk about how our popular culture is actually impacting the identity of the masculine. So we'd really like to actually dedicate a whole chat to you, if you're okay with that, closer to the release, because I think that's something in particular with music artists as well. Mental health is everything, and really having a strong identity, masculine identity, really helps you to navigate your way through, you know, the crazy of this.
Yeah.
So in particular, after this isolation program. So, you know.
Well, it's interesting, like just to give you, like, say, an American Australian perspective, like, it's really interesting the kind of I don't know, what do you call it, psychosexual culture or whatever in Australia. Like, you know, in some ways we're one of the most gender neutral countries in the world, I think. So, for instance, when my ex-wife first came to Australia, she honestly thought half the guys she met were, I'm just going to say it, homosexual.
Yeah.
And I think 95% of them were not. They were metrosexual men, married with kids. You know, in America, it's like, it's kind of like, I like to call it, it's like they've got a bit of a 50s patriarchal hangover in their culture. You know, it's a bit more like men are men and women are women kind of thing. That's slowly changing, but it's a very different culture here. We're much more gender neutral. Like, say, for instance, if you invite a lady out to a date in the States, you know, it's understood that no matter what your status is, you're expected to pay for everything until the woman says otherwise, for instance. In Australia, hey?
I love that. We don't have that here.
No, but in Australia, it's kind of, it's almost like if you tried to do that, just automatically pay for everything.
Yeah.
You know, there'd be quite a certain percentage of women that would actually find that patriarchally offensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that gives you a bit of an indication of the difference
Well,
the
it
culture.
sounds like we're going to have a good conversation, I think, about this when we get closer to your release. Yeah, there's a lot.
So I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as far as like the issues with male culture, it goes back to I put the blame firmly on Menzies' shoulders, Mr. Menzies, who created that whole chesty blonde, tough as nails, kind of Aussie bloke kind of, you know, he put that into the popular culture of Australia when he wasn't even that himself. It's a little bit like Hitler, really, isn't it?
Whoa.
And
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to talk
Politically
about
correct.
tonight. Well done.
can't believe I just said that. Menzies and Hitler. Woohoo!
There's the headline for today, folks. You heard it first. Ty, we're going to leave it there. It has been, and we.
But
will,
when
don't worry.
when you think about it, it was quite Aryan. You know, that whole Aussie thing was the, you know, in the white singlet, big, tall, you know, blonde, blue-eyed dude. It really was when you actually think about it. I only just came to that realization now in this conversation.
Yeah. Well, look, we have a lot to talk about, and we will continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
See you, mate.
Look,
Spirit fingers.
we'll be talking to you soon about the black dog and many other things. Take care.
Nice one.
Cheers.
Bye.